the way I'm going to start this off within the context of modern news and so forth, is Donald Trump's statement this week that Judaism is now going to be seen as a nationality. Okay, now why did he make this statement? So for political reasons, it basically now defines Jews as a national grouping, and therefore it's subject to greater legal enforcement against some type of discrimination against Jews. There seems to be that on the college campus, you can get away with some discrimination against religions, but you can't get away with some discrimination against ethnic groups or nationalities. So if Jews are defined as a nationality, it becomes tougher on colleges to just ignore actions against the Jews. So that became something in the news this week, and so forth and so forth. What it highlights for us is the issue again of in terms of what is a Jew. And we've talked about this before, okay, in terms of what is a Jew. So the point is the great issue of what is a Jew is, are we a religion or are we a nation?
Yes.
Okay? Now,
Yes.
Yes.
What? Yes.
Yes.
The point is it's like that search commercial. Both in one.
2 minutes in one.
2 minutes.
Two
in
minutes in
one.
one. The fact that the point is that this really became highlighted in a certain way with the advent of the 1800s, because Reform Judaism was saying we're a religion. Okay, that was really how we were trying to say it. Our nationality, let's say for German Jews, is German. Our religion is Jewish, just like Protestant religion is. That's it. And that's why early Reform Judaism was very much against Zionism. Our nation is Germany. Our religion is Judaism. The opposite extreme was found in the Zionist movement. Okay, the Zionist movement basically was saying we're a nation and not a religion. So and they really turned to this idea that Tanakh being basically not a religious work, but a reflection of Jewish nationality. Okay, and it was like Aesop's fables or other stories of that nature. Okay, and that's why many people don't know this, but Chidona Tanakh, right, which everyone talks about, started off as something really pushed through by the non-Dati. Okay, it was the basic Zionist, the Ben-Gurion Zionist educational department that really pushed for the Chidona Tanakh. Nowadays, if you read about people involved with Chidona Tanakh, they're mostly from Dati Leumi schools or about the Dati and so forth and so forth. Of course, there was that one case of the Jews for Jesus' girl who Holy for her becoming a finalist because she knew Tanakh. But the point is that really the Chidona Tanakh began with the non-religious, because they turned to Tanakh as the historical background or the mythology of the Jewish people. Okay, and that's why really they didn't focus on the God aspect, they focused on the nationalistic aspect, and specifically certain types of nationalistic figures, such as David Melech, Shlomo Melech, Shimshon HaGibor. This is what a Jew should be. And in certain ways, they also challenged the diaspora Jew of the Talmud. There was a very negative feeling towards the Talmud because it was perceived that the Talmud was the feeble Jew of the diaspora. So, but there was a real strong movement towards the Tanakh. But the point is that really you had a strong nationalistic side and a strong religious side. And that really was what occurred in the 1800s with the advent of Reform Judaism and its strength, and then Zionism, yeah.
Didn't that question really get asked first by Napoleon?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Napoleon really wanted to understand what Jews were. Because already in the early times of Napoleon, you already saw movements towards nationality. And the fact is that this is where it becomes somewhat significant in terms of religion. In many ways, you look in terms of the idea of the Zionistic movement, which really turned to the development of a Jewish culture. okay, you started having a Chada'am, who basically was an expert in analysis, really has a lot of very interesting ideas in terms of trying to find a Jewish ideal. Because what really happens, the truth is what happened with Zionism is you really need for develop a strong nation is you need a nation, you need a country. Okay? What the Zionists did is they first wanted to strengthen the national identity of the Jewish people through creating a national ideology, which would not be religious. But the fact is that in many ways the national ideology of the Jewish people was religious. So what eventually happened, even in terms of the secular Zionists, is that you look in terms of Israel today, unlike the early secular Zionists who would go out of their way of not celebrating religion, like you hear about the Shomer Hatzir kibbutz, which serve pork on Yom Kippur, because we don't want religion to be the mark of our national identity. But the point is that people really turned to their religious expression as their national identity. You see that, for example, in Golda Meir's statement, where Golda Meir said that the Jews in the diaspora should keep Shabbos, because this is the way you identify as a Jew. So the truth is these tendencies were developing. Okay, you go to people in terms of keeping Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Okay, how many people, you start seeing it in terms of people keeping Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. How many people in keeping Yom Kippur and fasting on Yom Kippur actually think about the fact that they're praying to God on Yom Kippur? Right? Okay, the point is this is what Jews do. And this is a mark of the group. And the group is a national identity or ethnic identity. Fact is that becomes the issue of how you mark this group. Okay? Now, the point is it marked as a ethnic identity, or is it marked as a theology? Okay? And this has become more and more of an issue over the years. You see it basically, what I'm describing is you see it in the general Jewish population. We have the state of Israel. What is the state of Israel? What is what does it mean to have a Jewish country? It just means a bunch of Jews living in this country. What defines Jews? Is it only people? I remember in the 90s, for example, there were movements in Israel arguing for the necessity to have one state. Okay? Not a two-state solution, a one-state solution. And what was the one-state solution? It wasn't a Jewish state, and it wasn't a Arab state. It was one democratic state. And what happens is that why can't we just be like the United States just a democratic country occupying this land, and it'll be Jews and non-Jews, and so forth. It wouldn't be a Jewish state. Okay? The issue arose that what happened is, and you find this from many Jews today, is they're all in favor of just having a democratic state. The great pride of Israel is the fact that it's democratic and it's liberal and it's all these things. So why do you need it to be Jewish? Okay, why do you think they need it to be Jewish? Because they don't trust the Arabs, okay, to be able to support a democratic state, because there's no Arab country, or especially Muslim country, that has this type of rights. Therefore, a lot of Jews in Israel, they'll talk about the need for a Jewish state, not because they want a Jewish state, because in order to protect having a democratic state, they have to have people who will accept democracy, and that basically is Jews. Okay, but these are all underlying issues in the general Jewish world in terms of identifying as a group and trying to find what you need to state in terms of group. And what then occurs is that religious practice becomes one way of identifying the group. There are many, many Jews who like wearing a kippah, okay, strangely so, not because they're religious, because they identify as such as a Jew. Yes, sir.
So, modern day state of Israel was created by the United Nations, I believe, with the phrase, a homeland for the Jewish people, no mention of religion. So would it be helpful to give us a rundown from the first days and the Torah, what it says, through Paro, through and Torquemada, all these important events in history, how we were perceived by the outside, not how we perceive ourselves, how the outside world perceived us.
The fact is, they're talking about the Jewish people, but people understood the Jewish people as what was the mark of this and designation of Jewish people. So what distinguished the Jewish people? So the first one they asked people about is what distinguished the Jewish people?
A bris.
Circumcision.
So, yeah.
Okay, in terms of physical ideas, okay, so, but you have
Well,
a
that works
strong,
for the men,
that's
but,
right, you have a strong population, the
Torah.
Jewish population who don't have that sign, but what does everyone think when they think about Jews?
Monotheism.
Torah and God.
Well,
Ethics.
the Torah, when you ask a person, okay, like, for example, what really is the basis of Judaism? What's the first answer you think of a person has?
But when the majority of Jews are not religious, it can be.
Ten Commandments.
Right, so, what?
How about a Jewish mother?
No, you see, that's interesting. What is a Jewish mother? When you ask Jews, what distinguishes the Jewish religion? You're Jewish. What does it mean to be Jewish rather than a member of another religion? What's distinct about your religion?
We don't believe in Christ.
Basically, we don't believe in
That's what
Jesus.
we don't believe, yeah.
That's what we don't believe in, right? That's what. Well, what's wrong? Well, I don't believe in Jesus. Oh, okay, that's the religion. We're the religion that doesn't believe in Jesus. And that's one of the reasons that people are so that Jews for Judaism serves a tremendous cause and much. But one of the reasons that it gets a lot of support is because the ideas of Jews believing in Jesus really freak people out. Okay, when you think about Jews not believing in Sinai, Jews cannot believe in Sinai. Reformed Judaism doesn't believe in Sinai. Jews are atheists. They just had all these polls that they found out so many Jews are atheists. Hey, the Reformed rabbis declare that they are atheists. That's okay. But if you believe in Jesus, hey, we don't want anything to do with you. The point is what? But the fact it's a fascinating dynamic, because really what happens is the question you're asking in terms of Jewish peoplehood. It's how do Jews understand themselves? Do we even understand it? And we talked about this before. Do we understand a theological distinction? Do we understand? No, because we see it as a grouping. It's a grouping because of peoplehood. Basically, most Jews think in terms of peoplehood. We don't understand our theological distinctions because basically we're all people. And then what we really think in terms of the religion is how we want to express our peoplehood. Not even necessarily believing in the religion, but this is what Jews do. And Reformed Judaism in the 90s, when they started pushing ritual. Now, Reformed Judaism didn't have a religious side to it, but the point of the matter is when it started pushing ritual, the early Reformed Judaism was very much against ritual. So I pointed out many times before, if in the 1960s you walked into a Reformed temple wearing a tallis, they would have said, please take it off. Right? Reformed Judaism was against the observance of ritual because the focus was ethics. But now, ritual is very much part of the Reformed conservative method because it distinguishes you as a Jew, and we want to be distinguished. I'm presenting all this to give a context to the idea that what's going on here is an issue of identity. Okay? And the issue of identity starts with the fact of how we see ourselves. The bottom line is that in that identity there's a tension between peoplehood and religion. Okay? The point is that has led to various different moves. But in the average Jewish concept, and this is really what occurs in our modern world, is peoplehood has really taken priority. If people really looked at the theology of Judaism, they wouldn't understand it. Okay? They think of Judaism as monolithic, when really Judaism, the four branches of Judaism, Orthodoxy, Conservative, Reform, and Reconstructionist, and I'm not talking about humanistic and so forth. The point is that those four branches, they make Christian distinctions pale in comparison. The differences between Reconstructionist Judaism and Orthodox Judaism in terms of theology, I can't think of a parallel form of theological distinction within Christianity. Okay, but the point is we are still one entity in terms of peoplehood. Okay, and the fact is that I've argued, it might be on my website, but I've argued that one of the reasons we have a problem with Jews for Jesus, for example, is not simply theological. Why is it that all of a sudden, because they have this little addition to theology, why all of a sudden do we start getting all upset? We accept atheist Jews. We accept we say an atheist Jew doesn't believe in God, but if you believe in Jesus, you're not Jewish. That's because being Jewish, okay, because really what it is Christianity was a source of anti-Semitism. So you're not going to take someone who's joining in with a group which is anti-Semitic. That we really have problems with. Belief in Judaism ties to anti-Semitism, so it's also a little bit more than that. In terms of Jewish identity, it's also based on the concept from Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik points out that there's two aspects of Jewish identity. There's shared fate and shared destiny. Those are his terms. And he shows shared fate is the shared idea that you're both in it together. For example, in Egypt, shared fate. If you were a Jew, you were a slave. Okay, that's a shared fate. It's also the example is the Holocaust. Okay? Hitler didn't care about your belief. It was the fact that if you were part of this group, you shared everyone's fate. It didn't matter whether you believed or not. It was a shared fate, and that's what happens as Jews. We have an aspect of shared fate. Okay. The other aspect is called shared destiny. Okay. Forget the rough language in Hebrew, but that's the way it's translated. Which basically says that's a shared theology, and that may not exist as in the world, but we are still connected to shared fate. So Rabbi Soloveitchik says, listen, that's what peoplehood is about. Peoplehood is a shared fate. When you really look at the issues in terms of Jews for Jesus, they no longer share our fate. F-A-T-E.
What about the genetic? What about genetics?
Okay, so genetics...
We're a race. We have...
So therefore that really ties to peoplehood. Because
But even if Jews for Jesus accept Jesus, genetically they're still Jews.
Yeah, that's why they can use the term Jews for Jesus. The point is the group doesn't accept them. The group doesn't accept them. But the fact is the reason the group doesn't accept them, in my perception, has a lot to do with shared fate. They're no longer going to share our destiny. What I mean by destiny in this case is not going to share what happens to us.
They will if there's a Hitler, because he doesn't care if they accept Jesus.
Yeah, but the point is, they point this out from what's her name, what was her name? She was a big philosopher in Europe before the war. No. She became a nun. Right, she became a nun, and she died in Auschwitz. And she went out of her way to die in Auschwitz. Why? Because she was in Belgium, and she was a nun, and the church would have hidden her away. If she didn't want to go to Auschwitz, she got gotten out of Auschwitz, but she went out of her way to go to Auschwitz in order to die in Auschwitz as a Jew, so she could declare herself Jewish, even though she was a nun, and make a statement that being Jewish is a peoplehood, and I could be Jewish even as a nun. But the way she did it, the Catholic Church would have been very happy to take her to Rome. And they think the Nazis, if the Catholic Church says, yeah, we know she's Jewish, but she's a nun, she's going with us. Okay, fine. She went out of her way to get sent to Auschwitz. Now the point is that in the end, if someone the perception is someone's a Christian, okay, and even they're born Jewish but they're Christian, in the end they're not going to be part of our group, okay. They can always say, I'm another member of the other group. But let me sort of focus where I want to get back to here. The point is that there's an aspect of people. Now you talk about genetics. If you look in terms of genetics, born to a Jewish mother, it's really an aspect of citizenship. How are you a citizen? You either immigrate, or you are born. Okay, so the strange things about Jewish citizenship is that you're born to a Jewish mother. Okay, now you don't have to be born on the land, but the truth of the matter is that if you're an American citizen and you have a kid in Outer Mongolia, the kid's an American citizen, right? Or there's one way you're born an American citizen, okay? Or you're, and by the way, that was interesting in terms of Ted Cruz,
Ted Cruz.
when he ran for president.
Yep.
You had to be a naturally born American. So people said he was born in Calgary. How could he be a naturally born American? Because his parents were American.
Okay, so
He
you're born
can't-
of, or you're born in.
Right. The point is that he was born to American parents, so he is essentially American. It's not naturalized. Or you have immigration. We call it immigration is really gerus. Gerus is translated as proselytization, but the truth is it's not really proselytization, because the fact is every ger effectively has to believe in Judaism before they become a ger. Okay? Why? Because to become a ger, what do you have to be? A ger is usually translated as convert. But in order to be a ger, what do you
Not a
have to be?
stranger.
Ger can be translated as stranger.
Wow.
It can be translated as stranger. The mean stranger it can also be convert. It can be an immigrant. Okay?
Immigrant.
Immigrant. Ger can also mean immigrant. But what is basically the idea of being an immigrant? The point is that you are born, you immigrate into Israel. A ger.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Can I have this chair? Do you mind? This gives you a better chair.
Okay, so the fact is that you immigrate to become part of the Jewish nation. And before you immigrate to become part of the Jewish nation, what you have to basically accept first is the fact you already accept the universal religion of Judaism. Okay, because you really have to be effectively a Noahide, right? A person who non-Jew who follows the Jewish law for Noahides, for non-Jews, right? Before you can be brought into the process of immigration. Okay, now, yes, sir.
But you can't be a Moabite that says where you go, I'll go, where your God will be my God, and your God people will be my
So-
people.
so-
So isn't that where the beginning, one of the earliest
Again.
statements of
Again,
being a people and
Again.
a religion?
wait a second. You're obviously referring to Ruth,
Yes, of course.
okay, and how Ruth immigrated into the Jewish people. Okay, the point is that she says your God will be my God. There's a whole bunch of issues with, but she's basically saying I accept your religion, and okay, because what happens within the universal religion of Judaism is that there's one God, so therefore there's one religion. Okay, a lot of people make a mistake like this. Judaism is a universal religion. It makes a distinction between the obligations in terms of your nationhood. If you are a Jew, if you're a member of the Jewish nation, you have a certain select aspect of obligations. If you're not a member of the Jewish nation, you have another set of obligations. Now, a person who is not Jewish still has obligations in terms of acceptance of God and God's laws. They can't murder. They can't do things. Those are called the 7 Noahide laws. Okay? So the point is the universal God has rules for Jews and non-Jews. The distinction is he has distinguished one nation which is given another an extensive set of laws to. Okay? Now the point is that nation, how are you a member of that nation? So one is you're born to a Jewish mother. In other words, there's a natural way of being a member of that nation. And then there's another way. And that is if you immigrate into that nation, which basically is what Gerus is about, which means you're changing your nationality. Which means in many cases that a person who is a believer in Judaism, the universal believer of Judaism, says, I now want to follow the Jewish code by becoming a member of the Jewish nation. Okay? So for example, Sean, in our Sunday morning shir, right, is a Noahide. He's been a Noahide for many, many years. His family are Noahides, right? He has decided that he does not want to become part of the Jewish people. He has the same beliefs as me. And you see from his knowledge, he reads a lot of Jewish stuff, and so forth and so forth. Whole question of whether Noachites can read Torah, so, but that's not, the fact of the matter is that in terms of his belief structure, he has basically beliefs of Orthodox Judaism. But he's not Jewish. He is observant non-Jew. Which is something, okay, but this, okay, the point is though, in terms of these sort of like complications, the bottom line feeling of being Jewish is that we are a people. Why do we say we are a people? Is we have a sense of community. We have a sense of connection. Okay? We feel good with other Jews. Okay? We like being in Israel. We like eating falafels. Some guys go to the beach on Shabbos, some guys don't go to the beach on Shabbos. Point of the matter is, yeah, we're angry that those people aren't keeping Shabbos, so, yeah, they should keep Shabbos and so forth. But the bottom line is that there's still a bunch of Jews. The point is that's an aspect of a social connection with people. Now this really is very, very existent in the non-religious world. Okay, where you have within the non-religious world, you have you had the Zionists who basically said we're a people and played down religion, okay? Although they wouldn't want a religion which would be attacking. That's why the Brother Daniel case was so significant in terms of Israel. Because the Israeli court basically said, listen, to be part of the group, you don't necessarily have to believe in God, but for sure you can't believe in Jesus. And it really was very, very interesting because Brother Daniel was, pursuant to your definition, actually Jewish. Right? But that decision was actually a fascinating decision because it was a decision by the Israeli government, by the Israeli courts, which was contrary to halacha. Okay, so his brother Daniel was Jewish. These are complications that arise from the fact that there was a communal nation of nationality.
Interesting.
This national perspective becomes an issue. Now, what happened, what I was going to say is what happened over time. The early secular Zionists were trying to get rid of ritual. They tried to say we want to be a nation and we don't want religion involved at all. So I told you the Shomer Tziyir basically tried to say we're going to eat pork on Yom Kippur. We're going to try not to bring any religious aspect into our identity. What occurred is it didn't happen, because what really happened, what you now find among the non-religious in Israel is a tremendous amount of people still listen to Shofar Rosh Hashanah, right? Do
Have
other
Seder in
religions,
Timbuktu.
right? Whatever. The point of the matter is that the religious expressions of the Jewish people became the identity of the people. In other words, you wore a tallis. This is why you find talisim in conservative Reformed temples nowadays. Does it mean that they're now bringing God back into it? No. It's that the religious practice of Jewishness has become the way that you identify as a Jew.
But not
And that's-
everyone was a keeper.
That's true. It's maybe your own decision, but the fact is that's why you'll have Reform rabbis saying they're atheists. It's not a necessity to believe in God, but we still want to have religious practice of a Jew because this is our way of stating that we are a group. Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Your hand was first.
So maybe can you give us some insight into what was their issue in saying why not both as a peoplehood to be, and also, yes, we're also religious, and there are other examples of peoples who have specific religious practice, and that's how they part of their identity.
So the point is you have it's interesting you bring this up. If you think in terms of Irish, right? There's Irish Catholics, and that's their identity, and therefore people think in terms of Ireland being Catholic. Okay, we'll say Southern Ireland, whatever. But the fact is being Catholic. But it's a universal religion that this people has adopted. In other words, if you're Catholic doesn't mean you're necessarily Irish, but Irish is a good chance you're Catholic.
I was actually thinking not so much about
They're sugar-free.
Catholicism, which is
Sugar-free?
fairly
Yeah.
widespread across many
Right.
countries,
I think
whether it's Ireland or France or take your pick of.
Yeah.
I was thinking more about the indigenous and
Yes.
Métis cultures, where
Yes.
their conceptions of God and religion
So-
and practices
Right.
and their
And-
peoplehood.
And very much so. And there is the case of idolatry. It's not just the indigenous things. You think in terms of the Romans. They had their own gods. The Greeks had their own gods. Right? Roman gods. Egypt had its own gods. The thing is that nations back in their old days had their own gods. In fact, nations basically believed it was my God against your God when they fought. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, the point is that Judaism has a little bit of a complication. Okay, that's why people, when they talk about Judaism from the academic world, okay, if you read from the academic world, there was a nation of Jews, and they had a God, the Jewish God, like other nations had their God, and then something happened where they developed that this God, our God, was universal. That, by the way, I'm making clear is apikoursis. I'm not advocating that position, but the heresy. But the point of the matter is that Judaism has a unique thing. It's not just the fact that we have our own God. It's we have the universal God, who's the God of everyone, who somehow has a special relationship with us. So when we wear tzitzis, we're not just doing a ritual that fits our God. We're doing a ritual that the universal God. So the question that arises, why is the universal God only requesting this behavior from this group and not from every other group?
Good.
Okay? And that's a worthwhile question. But the fact is the real question is you're absolutely correct. And by the way, a lot of people explain it that way. Academics explain it that way, that the Jewish people came first, and like every other peoples in those days, they had their God, and then somehow it became the universal God. But the fact is, from a Torah perspective, the one God who's universal created or declared a people to be distinct. And why is it that he has a people which is distinct within this universal religion? But the bottom line is what you're really describing, and I think Orr's really describing, is really the way most people think about their Jewishness. We are Jewish, we are basically a peoplehood, and the way we express it is through our unique religion. And we talk about one God, our God, but the point is, at the same point in time, we also want to make it our distinct God. In many, many ways, a lot of Jews have tremendous pride in saying we don't believe in Jesus. Because that basically says, hey, and we don't have this universal belief, right? We don't have the universal belief of Christianity. We have our own universal belief. Then the issue arises, what are we doing this way? But the point is that what really is key, what I'm really trying to develop is in the mind of most Jews, there's an aspect of peoplehood. And the peoplehood, and this is where it's different from the early Zionists, is expressed. Now, the truth of the matter is, the early Zionists got thought of their ideas, Achadim developed ideas from the Tanakh and so forth and so forth. But for a lot of people, the peoplehood is expressed through ritual practice. So for a lot of Jews, okay, they're not going to believe in the tribal God. Okay, that we're not doing, but they're going to understand their religious practice as reflecting their Jewish uniqueness, Jewish nationality, right? Okay, and you look at this, like for example, and this is not said with any type of critique, right? You have Chabad, be Jewish, light Shabbos candles. Okay, now the truth of the matter is, the universal God only commanded the Jews to keep Shabbat. Okay, so therefore lighting Shabbos candles is a Jewish thing to do. But the fact is for a lot of people, they're doing it because they want to associate with the Jewish group, which basically is much more of a peoplehood type group.
Or the latest campaign, let's get Am Yisrael rapping.
Right. What for tefillin? Okay. The point is that our focus is on peoplehood, and religion becomes the expression of peoplehood. But the bottom line is that's found throughout throughout the expression of Jewishness. So you have Reform rabbis who are an atheist and so forth and so forth. So when I talked in terms of talking about this Chabra, I talked in terms of social Judaism. The point is, we don't really deal with theology. Okay? How many Jews understand the theological distinctions between the branches of Judaism? No. What's the theology? Okay? How much do we really teach about God even in terms of yeshivot? We talk in terms of practice. And this leads into this issue of social orthodoxy. What always was assumed is that the truth is that I already pointed out that you had the Zionists already are real people. You had Reform Judaism, which basically had its own problems in the 1800s. And once the state of Israel and Zionism grew up, Reform Judaism became very, very, very pro-Zionist. Beforehand, they were not so. They were pretty much not Zionistic. But then they became much more pro-Zionist because it reflected the idea of Jewish connection. But the point is that if you look in terms of Orthodoxy, Orthodoxy was sort of, the Eibishter and God and so forth and so on. But the fact is, no one really understood the theology of it. Okay, there really wasn't the theology. You know, I remember once I was speaking to a rabbi who I listened to a few of his sermons, and then it dawned on me what was unique about his sermons. He spoke about God in his sermons. So I went over to him afterwards, and I said, after a few weeks of hearing his sermons, I went over to him and said, it just dawned on me that your sermons are much more unique because you actually talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu in your sermons. And then he told me the following story. He said, you know something? I have to tell you something. My first few weeks at the synagogue, the synagogue was mostly was non-religious people, and he said to me, I used to give these sermons, and then one day a committee from the board came to visit me. Rabbi, we have problems with your sermons. And it came out, what was their problem with the sermons? He sounded too much like a minister, because he kept talking about God. They were used to Rabbi's sermons being about Israel and Israeli politics and about this. The idea that it talked about God, wow, it really threw them off. The point is that Jews don't think about God. Right? They really don't think about God. The fact is...
Didn't we say in our education, our Jewish education, that they never bring... You said that in class, that they never bring God into our studies, I think.
It's very much practice defined.
Yeah.
There's some idea of maybe Talmudic discussion, but not necessarily with reference to
So
God.
not between 1 and 6. Really, too much anyway.
No, the problem is because of Jewish. Now, this is something that exists, but what's happened now. So that's what I mean by social Judaism. So the point is, so what really is making people wanting to be part of Jews is because they have a drive to be part of the Jewish group. So basically, you start with, why do we want to be part of the Jewish group? And the point is that one of the big problems that happened with the whole issue of assimilation, intermarriage, and so forth, is that people, one generation had very strong feelings of being Jewish. Now you have to look, why did people have strong feelings they want to be part of the group? One is the way they were brought up. So they had strong feelings being part of the group. One was anti-Semitism, because the others made you want to be part of the group. And part of it was the fact that the expression of the group was through their behavior, because many of them came from religious homes. Not because they had tremendous religious educations, but because they were brought up doing things and so forth and so forth. What occurred, though, is that this became so what really started happening with assimilation and intermarriage, and people couldn't understand this at first. Guy comes home with this nice girl. She's a very nice person, and so forth, but she's not Jewish. How can you marry her? She's not Jewish. But she's such a nice person. And it came out that in every possible way, they were both from the same social group. They both liked the same TV shows. They both liked the same music. So on a social level, they all shared the same thing. And the fact is it was a whole different social group. And what started happening is Jews said, hey, you know something? We have a new social group. My new group is the guys who play tennis with. at the tennis club, and they're not necessarily Jewish. Or my new group is the guys who I like playing chess with, or the guys I like this with. And the fact is, new social groups came up. And what happened with the new social groups was the fact that, not so important for me to marry a Jew because I have other social groups I can be part of. The thing is that happened in the non-Jewish world because the whole identity of being Jewish was being Jew. Was the thing. When you went up to people, I remember I talked about this 30, 40 years ago when I was doing some stuff on campuses. And you mentioned to people, and some people, like, why should these people be Jewish? And there were a whole group of kids who said, well, what are you talking about? Of course you're Jewish. You should want to be Jewish. The fact is that there was this drive in people to want to be Jewish, which basically says the drive in people to associate with this group. But what they didn't recognize is there were a whole other part of people who no longer had the desire to be that group, and therefore when they were confronting assimilation into marriage, there was no reason for them to be Jewish. Why should they be Jewish? Okay, which raises a whole different, and that's an issue that happens in the general world. It starts, what we're getting at, what occurs from this whole idea of the social Judaism is the fact it comes from I want. I want to be part of this group. Now, where does that take you? So it takes you that if this driving you is reinforced, it's great. Go off to Israel, you feel good about the group, then you'll be reinforced. If you're not turned on, you won't be reinforced and you won't necessarily associate. But it starts with, I have a drive to be. There's no reason from the outside to be part of the group, except there was one reason from the outside that did happen in terms of being part of the group. That was anti-Semitism. I may not want to be part of the group, but boy, I better be part of the group because that guy over there is going to remind me I'm part of that group. Except for what you saw in the early fights against assimilation was a strong announcement about anti-Semitism. So you had, hey, it's good to be Jewish, like it. Okay, it's good to be part of this group. Okay, Sandy Koufax was Jewish, isn't it great? You too can pitch and be in the World Series. But the point is the other idea was the fact that there was the anti-Semitism telling you not that you better understand you're part of the group because the other person is going to make you part of the group, and that could turn out bad. Now, that was happening in the general world, and that's social Judaism. And then you had issues in terms of defining religious as a way of marking the group.
I've just got one question, and it's continuing throughout the discussion. The term cultural or cultural Judaism.
Yes.
Where does that fit in this discussion?
That's within this idea. I'm taking it from just cultural to social to point out the fact that people want to identify with the group. It's not just cultural, it's the idea that I want to identify. This is my group. Okay. What then has occurred, and a person wrote about this article in 2014, he came up with this term called social orthodoxy. Okay? In terms of social orthodoxy, it's this new term, it became a term, that identified people practicing orthodoxy without orthodox beliefs. So the guy who wrote this article, this is the article, it's an article from, I have it here. It's an article from Commentary Magazine, okay? It's called The Rise of Social Orthodoxy, a personal account by a person named J.P. Lefkowitz. Okay, it's from 2014, I believe. And he basically invented this term to describe a new phenomena, what he defined as a new phenomena within the Orthodox world. Okay?
So what was the source, this hesitation, if even in the right-wing Orthodox circles, God isn't really talked about, he's not part of the primary education of the children, what's the source of that? How did God get elbowed out of
How was
that?
God,
where
how
did
was
we
God
lose 'em?
excluded?
Where do we lose them?
Okay, so let me. Okay, I'm going to get to that. Give me a sec to get
Oh, and
there.
I like the way you said that.
Okay. The fact is that this started saying was what he started writing about is the fact there are many people who may not believe in Orthodox Judaism, but are orthopractic. Okay, like he talks about his day. He always puts on tefillin, so forth, but he's an agnostic. Okay, and he starts saying, and he comes up with the idea that really it's Mordecai Kaplan's idea of Jewishness on a certain level. The only thing is the way you identify as a Jew is by first behaving as a Jew. Then you start belonging as a Jew because your desire is to belong as a Jew. And then maybe you'll believe. And then he makes the biggest mistake that a lot of Jews make. He invokes the famous term Naaseh v'nishma.
I was just gonna.
Okay, which is the most misunderstood term in Jewish thought. Okay, I take a lot of significance to this because of the name of my organization. I took Nishma for a reason from Naaseh v'nishma because you have to understand what Naaseh v'nishma is about. Naaseh v'nishma, we will do and we will say, is not about we're doing first and then we'll think about it. Okay? The point is, the Jews had to have a reason for why they said Naaseh v'nishma. What they basically said was, we will take your specific commandments without knowing the details of the reasons of all the commandments because, okay, we accept the idea that what God tells us to do has validity, even if we don't understand it. And it's a statement about God. And that's brought out in all the Midrashic literature in Naaseh v'nishma. Naaseh v'nishma is not, we will do and then we'll think. Naaseh v'nishma is a very thoughtful statement. Okay, what is a statement that says, listen, when I confront God, or when I relate to God, I have to understand that I'm relating to a being that knows a lot more than me, okay, has a lot more insight than me, is incomprehensible to me, and if God for some reason is telling me it's good to do this, what's my choice? Okay, this is good. God's telling me this is a good idea. It's like investing in the stock market. God came up to you and said, listen, I got a tip for you. Buy stock X. Oh, let me think about that. I haven't invested. You're going to read the Wall Street Journal and stock X at that point in time? If God said to you, invest in stock X, well, I got to check it out, you know. Can I look up, can I get some information about the stock?
Sheet?
Right? Can I look at the balance sheet? What would you do if God said invest in stock X?
All your money, throw it in.
say, yes, thank you. Right? Because whatever God's going to tell you to do is right. Okay, so thank you very much. So Naaseh v'nishma was a recognition that what God's telling me to do is right. Now comes the second part of it. Okay? The second part of it is God doesn't just like give it like treating you as a moron. God also wants to make you think. So if I'm just doing it because God told me it's right, there's a little bit of a problem with it. I'm not really making my own choice.
But it presupposes a very deep belief in God at the first.
Right.
You can't say
Right.
Naaseh if
Right.
you don't have.
And who's the God who basically said, I'm giving you the Torah? Ani Hashem Elokecha asher hoseti etcha mi'eretz Mitzrayim. Okay, he didn't sit there and say, I don't want to take you out of
Didn't he also
Egypt.
put us in there?
Yes, that's true.
First?
That's true.
You noticed that, didn't you?
That's my
true.
argument.
That's true. That's true. That has to be dealt with. That has to be dealt with. But at this point in time, he doesn't say, I'm the creator of the world. I know things. He's basically saying, okay, you just went through the Red Sea. You just saw this, okay? Now, I'm telling you, this is a good idea. So he's sitting there and saying, okay, Naaseh v'nishma is not a stupid thing. Naaseh
Isn't
v'nishma.
there the component that when you accept
Yeah.
that you're going to be inspired to also do more?
That
But
could
it's
be,
going
but
to
that's
give
but
you-
that's not the issue here. The issue is that when you do say yes, you still have the idea that I recognize that it's much better if I still understand it. And there's what Nishma is about is listen.
Well, that's part of what Trey is saying.
Yeah,
That's
but
part
it's
of
not
what
just
Trey-
inspiring, dude. It's like the idea that you know something. I understand you that I should invest in this stock, but I think you also want to be someone who sort of knows what it's about. So I'm going to invest in that stock, but I also would like the balance sheets because I'd like to understand more. The point is that to many people in their relationship with God, in terms of the incomprehensibility of them, it's basically enough just to say, yes, God, yes, 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 yes. The fact is, what God wants is for you to basically say, understand that what I'm going to tell you is going to be beyond your comprehension, but at the same point in time, I want you to accept the idea that you if you're going to come close to me, you have to understand. That comes from the simple idea that what are we supposed to be? We're supposed to emulate God. We're supposed to follow God and listen to Him. We're also supposed to emulate Him. Emulate Him means we have to try and understand as much as we can the same way God's understand, even though it's always incomprehensible to us. So the point is that the uniqueness of the Jewish religion, in many ways, is the fact that you are relating to this inherent quandary in our relationship with God. You are relating to someone who's always right, who has absolute knowledge, who's beyond our comprehension. That's one of the issues that gets me with this whole issue with evolution and creation. Creation took 7 days. So when was E equals MC squared created? Okay? Well, if E equals MC squared was created in 1 day, so what happened with all the rest of the laws of physics? There was the whole world was created in one moment. I can understand that all the rules of physics were created in one moment. But if the world is created over time, it also means that the rules of physics have to be created over those 7 days. And then I'm left with an issue. I can't understand creation. I can't understand what's going on over here.
Well,
so the problem with what?
There's some physicists who speculate that the laws of physics as we know them now have not always been so. There was a transitional period.
Okay, but and therefore
Conveniently explains it away.
that's one way of understanding. But the point is the reason I don't get involved in the whole issue is because I don't even know what you're talking about when you talk about the 7 days of creation. All I'm trying to say is you're talking about a reality, right, that I don't really understand. So the point is the distinction between evolution and creation is a much broader distinction between the fact that we have a reality today and there was another reality, and I don't know how this reality relates to that reality. So you're saying some physicists are trying to make that connection, but the point is
not for creationist purposes,
I understand.
For completely within the realm of physics.
I understand, but the fact is that already makes it a much more complex reality. So the truth is the acceptance of the God of Torah is a very, very complex acceptance of God. So what happens is that for in many ways the desire of social orthodoxy or social Judaism is I have a desire to join with this group. What I've expressed is that joining the group may come from a natural desire to be part of this group. It may come from a fear of anti-Semitism, which may push you into this group. Okay? There's another possibility. You may have a feeling for spirituality, which usually leads someone to basically accept God, but on a simplistic level. Because the God you want to accept is to fulfill your desire of spirituality, so you don't really investigate it. So a lot of times when I hear answers about the proof of God, I have a proof for God. The fact of the matter is you want a proof of God because you want spirituality. But that doesn't mean the proof of God that you have is actually very, very substantial. The point is you want that proof of God. But what really happens in the Jewish perspective? The truth is the original statement of Hecht of NISHMA, the original statement of Revelation, was the confrontation with God. Where basically there was a drive to associate, there was a drive to be part of this group, but at the same point in time, you were now in a relationship with God that created a certain type of interaction. I don't want to say tension, but it created a certain amount of confrontation. So the point is, and this happens actually through a lot of the Jewish ideas. You know, Avram at the Akedah, all these issues of Avram and the Akedah, what really was the Akedah about? Is Avram confronting a side to God that he didn't understand before. Okay? The point of the matter is you see this all the time throughout Jewish history, throughout Jewish thought. Moshe Rabbeinu confronting God. Because the fact is there is a confrontation in that idea. It's not just the social movement, but social orthodoxy are people who want to identify with the group. The way they want to identify with the group is by doing behavior, right? And having a behavior of Orthodox. Why? Because for some reason they want to belong to this group. But the bottom line is the reality of God is not necessary. So when I talk about the issue here of social orthodoxy, where has the authority of God come from, the truth of the matter is that for a lot of people, God is created in their own image, or the lack of God is created in their own image, because they have a desire. So since you have a desire, you can create a God that you want, which fulfills your spiritual drive, like Maslow, or something like that. But the fact is that what Judaism constantly is talking about is the confrontation with God. You do constantly run into issues that should bother you. And if it doesn't bother you, issues in Tanakh should bother you. You have a question, how could God command Avram to sacrifice Yitzchak? That's a good question. And that leads to you to try understanding who God is. But the point of the matter is, it puts you into a dialogue. You're not going to actually have a dialogue with God. You're going to have a dialogue with yourself to understand it. And so much of Jewish thought is actually constantly challenge you to reconsider what's going on. And there's so many aspects of this in Tanakh, where the stories in Tanakh are not simplistic stories. You can go through all the people in Tanakh, and basically they don't fall into the model of what I would call social Judaism, which makes you just want to belong to the group. Okay? The point of the matter is that we have constant issues in terms of that relationship with God, and go over this over and over again. Yes, sir.
There's another aspect, and that's my aspect, is that who am I? I am one individual that's a link in a chain of 150 generations that stood at Sinai, and I have fear, I have awe, and I have total respect for all my ancestors, that God forbid I should turn away.
Yeah,
I mean,
but that's a personal emotion.
But that's an emotion that every Jew should have.
Well, you see, when you say every Jew should have, the fact is that may be true. The point is, some Jews don't have it. Okay, and the point is that when you say every Jew should have, the point is every time you say you should have is based upon an education. Once I accept the principles that lead to the conclusion that every Jew should have this emotion, then what you really have is the acceptance of those principles. But then you also already have gotten to the point of why every Jew has those should have those emotions. You know, it's interesting in the sense that I read someone say recently, you know, it's like why should I be bound by an ethic that was developed 3,000 years ago? See, you see what I'm getting at is that there is a drive for why people wish to be Jewish, and there's different definitions of being Jewish, but a lot of it flows from oneself. What you see in social orthodoxy is a very strange type of drive in the terms of people wishing to identify with with behavior as Orthodox, which is not simple behavior, right? It's not just simply, it's basically following the laws of Orthodoxy, basically, you know, some of them move aside, but basically, and accepting the limitations of the Orthodox lifestyle, and then say, where does it come from? Because I want the desire to be part of this group. Well, that's good. We should feel a desire to be part of the Jewish people. But at that point in time, what occurs is this lack of acceptance, but I don't have to accept God. The point is, what happens with the lack of acceptance of God is the understanding of the very dynamic of the relationship with God.
Well, how can they still be considered Orthodox?
Okay, so the truth is it raises an interesting question.
Right.
Could someone who let's say keeps Shabbos, who says I don't believe in God, right? Could he count for a minyan, for example? So the fact is it's an interesting issue.
It depends if he makes it public or not.
Yes.
Well, I always heard the definition of Orthodox is that you're Shomer Shabbos, Kosher, Hecht of NISHMA.
See, that's a very narrow definition.
It's practice or
But this is
Yeah, it's
what I
practice
was
orthodoxy.
told.
Practice orthodoxy. Keep kosher. And that, which means if you wear shadnus, you can still be orthodox.
But what
Is
I
that-
want to
is that-
say.
What's that? You're not going to respond to that? If you wear shadnus, then shadnus, woolen linen together. Will you say
Are you
it's
still Orthodox
it's
if you
still
do that?
orthodox if you wear shadnus?
I think so.
I
No, you
don't
know,
think so.
no, you just broke one of the
Yeah.
laws
Yeah.
along the way.
Yeah,
That's
does it
all.
remove your
You know,
Judaism
it's
from
like-
you? No.
You know, it's like turning a
Genetics
light on
don't change.
Shabbos by
You
mistake.
know, everybody
Yeah.
sins.
Okay, so
You know,
therefore-
some people do it
okay, so-
willingly, some people do it
so-
accidentally.
But people used to be.
But if you don't keep Torah,
but it used to
if you
be
don't
a great
keep
source
Shabbat, or if you
of
violate it.
suffering even.
Yes.
It was a tragedy. People used to say, I wish I could believe in God more. I want to do these things. They don't give me happiness. It used to be, I used to hear people talking like this. It was a conflict. It was serious. Now it's become this is now a badge.
Yeah.
So this is, you know, and a whole new social grouping has grown up. I don't understand.
Right.
What happened to the sense of.
What has happened is because of what you're saying over here. What has occurred is, and we didn't get into this. What has occurred is that behavior became the only definition of Jewish of orthodoxy, based upon statements like that. Now, the truth of the matter, behavior is an easy way of identifying. They don't know what's going through someone's head. But the point is that it really matters what behavior is. Okay? Like I've joked around with some
What about
this.
Kavana?
So the kavana, by the way, there's
behind the
different
behavior.
definitions of kavana. But the most basic view of kavana is that you're doing it because it is God's command. So for example, okay, if a person is making kiddush for you Friday night, and he doesn't believe in God, and he's saying the bracha, okay, it's a little bit, it's not, there's some issues on this example, I'm not getting into it, okay, but if you hold kiddush al yain as doraisa, okay, and things like that, the fact of the matter is that the person is not saying it with the kavana that he's doing it because God told him, that he does not fulfill the mitzvah for you, okay, because it has no status as a fulfilled command.
But there's no way to know if somebody else has kavana.
So the po-
Yeah,
that's
don't
true.
exactly
That's
interview
true.
them.
That's
Yeah.
true. But the point that's true.
Back to my
But
saying,
the fact is,
have they
Asking
made
them
it
before
public
you
or not, what their actual
yes, you're
belief
right,
is?
exactly. But
They
the point
may have just been sleep deprived and not have kavana in that
no, wait a
moment.
second. Kavana,
Yeah.
kavana is not this big. It's not kavana of spiritual idea. It's knowing it.
No,
but doing it.
intentionality.
In other words, I'm doing it because
Because it's
God
commanded.
commanded me.
But why would
That's it.
anybody do it? Okay, even if they're not feeling
Because
it.
there's
you know,
social,
and-
No, no,
because
feeling
of
is so
social
intentionality.
orthodoxy. It's the way I want to behave to belong to
But
the
why
group.
would they take that responsibility to lead, to stand at the
Because
on
that's
that
part
or
of what you
whatever,
do.
if
This
they
guy, for
don't-
example, this guy who says, mostly he says kiddush for his family Friday night. Okay? He's running around, he sends his kids to day schools, so the point is, there's this kiddush, and it's a little bit more complicated with kiddush, but the
But
point is,
everyone is struggling at some point with doubt. So
struggling
one
with
thing.
doubt is one thing. We're not talking about struggling with doubt. We're talking
made
about
that decision. You're beyond that decision.
You're making a statement that says, I'm not doing this because I believe God commanded me. I'm not even thinking that God commanded me. I'm doing it because it's a behavior that associates with this group. I want to associate
But
with
the
this
meaning,
group.
but the
How
words
is
of the
that different
bracha
from
said,
conservative
"Asher kiddush
Judaism?"
Shalom."
Right, exactly. The point of the matter is that
I'm just
it's-
reciting something that my ancestors have said, and that's the only reason I'm doing it.
yeah, that's exactly it.
Well, that's what we
Eh,
did
we
at
could
just-
camp.
Well,
When
you
I
could
was
put
growing
together,
up, I mean,
you could put together
You didn't
any
have-
string
you
of
didn't have the
phonetics.
explanations.
And blah blah jujapa, and for all you know, in some language, that is an invocation of holy
But
who knows
but
what.
the point, the fact is that there are that's what's so fascinating about this idea. We're not talking about one person. We're talking about a definition, and there's
We're talking about a whole movement.
this is actually tied to a recent research study, a survey done by an organization called NISHMA research, no connection to the NISHMA we're involved with here, but this NISHMA research is a whole analysis of modern Orthodoxy and how many people within the modern Orthodox world don't necessarily believe in God, even though they are almost fully observant. Now I'll take this one step further. There's a website called thetorah.com. Okay, now this was an article that someone gave me from the Global Mail a couple weeks ago, right? And it's an article about this website called thetorah.com.
The what?
Thetorah.com. Okay, and it's and these four rabbis, okay, are behind it now and so forth. It's a website that basically the progenitors don't necessarily believe the Torah comes from Sinai. Okay, even though they are Orthodox practitioners. Okay, so these four rabbis will be defined as Orthodox because of their practice. Okay.
Defined as such by whom?
By generally the people perceive it. The truth of the matter is
The general
one
community.
of them, the general community, but other people, like for example, one of these is a product. This person, Zev Farber, is a shining light at Yeshiva Chovei Torah, which is new open Orthodox yeshiva. Okay, and he has come out point blank that he does not believe in Torah Misina. Does not believe in the revelation of Sinai.
Read that paragraph that he wrote, where he talked about the snake didn't lose his legs.
Yeah, I mean that was Midrashic stuff. Let's find it. I'm sorry, I have to find it.
Okay.
But the fact is that he is a graduate of Chovei Torah and so forth, and he's come out in other places where he basically says he doesn't believe in revelation. Now I can tell you right now, he's one of the reasons that the Rabbinical Council of America will not accept graduates of Chovei Torah as members of their organization.
Wow.
Rabbinical Council of America is the largest rabbinical organization in North America. It's mostly modern Orthodox, but it also has a yeshiva side to it. And the president of it, the president of the RCA, is Rabbi Karupkin from the Beit. So it's a pretty substantial idea. They will not accept graduates of Chovei Torah. Now the point is because Chovei Torah has a graduate. This is an example of a graduate who does not accept the basic principles of Orthodox faith. Now the point is it's part of the issue. There are people who basically don't believe, and yet they still want to do this practice. But their motivation. Now the reason I
But
mentioned
is
this.
he the rule or the exception?
From what group?
Exception.
From that yeshiva?
That's a good question. I don't know. The
That's
point
part of the
is-
controversy.
That's part of the controversy. The fact is that
Is it reasonable to paint the
there
entire sheet
are-
with the same brush
The truth is
based on one
that there are
person?
cases of people, from what I understand, and don't quote me on this, but from what I understand, there are cases of people who have who have graduated from Chovei Torah, then got a smicha from someone else or some other place, and to meet the RCA standards, and have been accepted from the RCA. So having smicha from Chovei Torah doesn't necessarily mean you can't join the RCA, but you have to. So it's possible a person might be in the Chovei Torah who doesn't believe it. Something. I don't want to get into that issue about that institution, but the point is that you have these four rabbis here who started this website called Torah.com, thetorah.com, which basically allows people who write on the website who don't necessarily believe in Torah Misina and accept much more of an academic study of the Bible and stuff like that. And the question arises: is that acceptable? Should we have a broader acceptance of that? And other people say no. In order to be Orthodox, you have to have the acceptance of Torah Misina.
So how is that different from Rabbi Saltzman? Now you got me in a.
So Rabbi Saltzman was not an Orthodox rabbi. Rabbi
But,
Saltzman-
but
in
he-
practice.
What's the difference?
In
He
practice,
lived
was.
his life that. How is that different from these four rabbis?
You're right. The fact of the matter is Rabbi Saltzman was never an Orthodox rabbi. And if you read his books, he himself makes it clear that he does not believe in Orthodox theology.
But if people come
theology.
forward who want to be accepted as Orthodox, who want to call themselves Orthodox,
But Rabbi
and yet
Saltzman never wanted to call himself
that's
Orthodox.
exactly.
Okay, He didn't call
Why
himself
would someone
Orthodox.
want to call themselves Orthodox?
Because,
This is the
because,
basic point,
but
isn't it?
that's the
Yeah, it
point.
is, I don't
But that's
understand.
exactly it. The fact is they want to be perceived by that. But the point is,
Why?
what I'm getting at is because they want to belong to the group.
Why this group? Why don't they belong to
Ah, so that's a good question. But also they want to be perceived to be involved in the study of Torah. Even though the study of Torah, from a halachic perspective, would be within certain frameworks. Okay? Okay, the bottom line is that if you approach Torah with outside these certain frameworks, it's no longer, if you want to read those works as a, as an addendum to your study and so forth, that's fine. But to sit there and say, this is Torah, it's not Torah. Torah must be based upon certain fundamental principles. The point is that, and I guess this is what I'm really getting at, is people are driven by what they want. Okay? Now the truth is I also find that there's a segment of the Jewish world, within the Orthodox Jewish world, who are so driven by a simplistic view of God, or so driven by a simple spirituality, that they come up with definitions of God which can fit within the arguments within Orthodoxy. And I'm not going to say what they say is anti-Orthodox, but the fact is they don't understand the full depth. They don't understand the issues. Why? Because they're supported by the idea. So, for example, the argument I hear these arguments of people. God created dinosaur bones, right, in creation, so that people would have doubt, because that forms bechira, that allows for free choice. So the reason we're finding dinosaur bones that seem to imply that the world was millions of years old is because God wants to seed doubt so that people have free choice to be able to make the right decision that God created the world in 6 days. I look at this and say, you really believe God created dinosaur bones in order to reach this issue? Yeah, prove it. Give me an argument. Okay, but people will come up with that. Why? Because they want a simplistic view of God. They're driven for it. The truth of the matter is, what I'm really pointing out is that people are driven from themselves. They want to be part of a group. They want to be part of the Jewish group. They want to be part of the Orthodox group. Oh, they run into a problem because they don't necessarily believe. Okay, fine, but I do action. I follow the mitzvah. And then because we were patiently pushing the behavior, like you're saying, the definition of Orthodoxy is based, but it's based on those things because that basically defined you as a Jew. The truth of the matter is that halachically you were defined as Orthodox if you were Shomer Shabbos, because that was a way of defining someone as Orthodox, because who would be Shomer Shabbos if they didn't believe in it? Okay? Okay, well, you're keeping
obviously
this
the social.
So now it's not such a simple definition. But the point is that it allows me to basically have what I want. It comes from me. I want this group. I want this. I want this identity. I want this. And it's not just in Torah Orthodoxy. Social Judaism. I don't necessarily believe in God, but I want to be part of the Jews. I want to feel that feeling, and that in terms of this feeling by putting a talus over my head. Okay, not that I really believe I'm relating to God or not. But the point is that what is gone is the confrontational aspect of Jewish thought. See, the distinction between the heavy religion of Judaism and what we would call to be the dogmatic religions is that when they confront God, it's basically, God is basically, I'm right and this is it. Here's the right answer.
It's
Other
narcissistic.
religions, what?
It's narcissistic. It comes from.
Well, and now it's basically, most religions have a vision of God of basically not encouraging thought. It's like, hey, you're supposed to listen to God. You're supposed to listen to God as an idiot. Okay? You're supposed to just say, he says jump, how high. The truth of the matter is, from a Jewish perspective, there's a value in emulating God. Emulating God says that God wants to think. So the truth is that's part of the issue. And that's why, let's say, if you read my article, Tree of Knowledge article, it's the most important part is on the website. If you read it, you find that what is on the Chabad's issue? On one hand, they knew they had to listen to God. They were Ovdei Hashem. They were servants of God, like every aspect of creation. But the other side of it is that they were supposed to emulate God. And what's the biggest definition of God?
Search. No.
God.
That He makes His own decisions.
This
Right? That He is a will. When the snake said, "Eat from the tree and you'll be like God," He wasn't lying. He was telling the truth. He was saying, you know something, you have to know the choices. You have to understand the full depth of life in order to get to it. And that's the only way you can be godlike. And Adam was felt with a dilemma. I'm supposed to emulate God, which means I need this information. On the other hand, God told me not to. What do I do? And he had a dilemma. It wasn't this dilemma between good and evil. It was the dilemma of the paradox. And he made one decision. And God said, okay, pursuant to that decision, this is the way life now has to go for you to deal with the decision that you made in order to achieve the answer to this paradox. The point is, it's from our perspective, God wants you to think. But at the same point in time, He also wants you to recognize that He's God. So when we deal with mitzvot, it's not just the fact that we want to be part of it, we don't want to just connect to it, we want to be involved in that confrontation with the divine. Okay? And you see this throughout the Tanakh. There was always confrontation. And because there was always dual messages. It's like a crazy thing. People point this out. Shmuel HaNavi is told, go crown David a Melech. Go crown David a Melech. What does Shmuel say? He says, God is telling me, I want you to go crown David a Melech. Okay? What's Shmuel's concern?
Shaul's still alive.
Shaul will find out. No problem.
His brother.
Excuse me, Shmuel. God is telling you to go anoint David a Melech. Okay? And you're concerned because Shaul HaMelech is going to find out and kill you. Excuse me, who's telling you to do this? I mean, come on. I mean, like, right? Maybe you can rely upon the fact that God will be on your side. You know, it's like, you know, he
Go buy this stock.
Right? Yeah, right. The fact is, Shmuel says, you know something? I also have to consider reality. In this world, I have to be considered with these things and so forth. And then Shaul HaMelech is such a complicated figure. Shaul HaMelech, you know, he does this, but he's still considered to be a tzaddik because he had dilemmas, the issues, and so forth. And you see also the fact is that so many great people with Jewish life, we see them making mistakes. Sometimes we sit there, they made a mistake. Other times we sit there and say, yeah, the mistake they're culpable for. Sometimes they just made a mistake and so forth. But we understand it. The point of the matter is, it's a great dilemma. It's a great challenge. Understanding God. You know, it's like you got to know when to hold. You got to know when to fold. God's not giving you all the answers. He's basically saying, okay, figure this out. Okay? And you see this from the challenges of the great people in Jewish life. They understood this. The point is that really what's lost, and this is what gets me, people want this social idea, it's all because of people. Now this didn't answer the original question of why does God distinguish His people. But the point is so much of Jewish identity is we want to associate with the people of Jewishness. And we have to recognize that one of the marks of being Jewish is the observance of mitzvot. But there's an issue if you think that all of Jewishness is about just observing the mitzvot. Because it's not just about defining this grouping. Yeah, it's a good thing to have a desire to be part of this grouping. But the point is that really what it's about is this grouping is unique because the Jewish people are supposed to be the people that deal with issues. It's Yisrael. What's Yisrael noted for? Struggling with the angel. His whole life was about struggle. How do I understand this? How do I relate to Esav? How do I relate to Lavan? And he wasn't given simple answers. Okay? And the point is he always had this. The fact is that what we're supposed to do. And then God gives us some information about how we confront these issues, but He doesn't give us all the answers. Because He wants you to think as well. Okay? And you really see this. You see this in all the stories that deal with so many issues in terms of how you confront the reality. Yaakov is Yisrael. He's a man who constantly has issues. And like I say Sunday mornings, the Christians like to turn the Old Testament into a real problem because look how bad the brothers were. But they all had reasons and issues and difficulties, and they all represented the conflict of values. Okay, value, and I mentioned this in my last insight. I mentioned free choice within Judaism is not a choice between good and evil. It usually is a choice between this good value and that good value. Which one should have priority? Okay? And that's not so simple. You see it in the conflict of Jewish ideas. The point is that you take an issue like euthanasia. Do you ever see the complexity of the values in euthanasia? There's a value in wanting someone not to suffer. A value in wanting someone to live. It's a conflict. Okay? God wants us to at least confront that conflict. Then He gives us some ways to work it out. Some ways we like, some ways we not like. But the fact of the matter is, He gives ways where and the Jewish people are supposed to be in the lead of dealing with these type of issues. Because what God figured out is He needed a special nation devoted to thinking, devoted to this idea. Okay?
They don't call us the people of the book for nothing.
That's exactly. And then they have to teach the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way God originally thought He can go to everyone. No, you need a certain group of people focused on these ideas, and then other people work on other things.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is that's what gets me. It came up from reading about social orthodoxy and reading about how like this group of 4 rabbis who they're so involved in Torah study they're willing to read anything, and without understanding the confrontation of the belief. There is a God that has to be in the mind of the Jew, okay, to really understand what it's about, okay, and the truth is, it's not just that religion is the way we express ourselves. Religion is part of our identity in terms of working it out. I remember once I spoke in Hamilton on Yom Kippur. I was doing a program in the shul in Hamilton on Yom Kippur. And my question to all these people there, they were all there for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So I went to them and I said, okay, because during Musaf we had a special program for people. And basically the shul emptied out because they didn't want to. So I said, okay, why are you here? Because it's a Jewish thing to do. I said, you know something, can I give you guys a suggestion? It's much more fun in terms of a Jewish thing to do to pick Purim as the day that you're going to be Jewish.
Yeah,
or to pick Simchas Torah. That's a much greater day. This is the way you got to show that you're Jewish, by picking a day you're going to fast on and spending the day in the synagogue. There's other ways to show that you're Jewish. It's a lot more fun. And what happened was people started saying, hey, he's got a point there. He's got a point there, you know. Fact of the matter is that's what's so fascinating. People think in terms of identity. And now we have it in terms of orthodoxy. People following orthodoxy in terms of identity. The point is, what's being lost is the fact that there's value in identity, there's value in joining the group, but the real value of Judaism, of Torah, really comes in the confrontation of ideas. And that's what God really wanted to do in terms of what His presentation was. It's not simple. It's to make you think. And we've lost that in many ways because we have lost the theology. We're not really confronting who God is because, I think in certain ways, because we want the simple spiritual aspect of God, simplistic spiritual perception of God, that, oh wow, you know, the truth of the matter is God has is basically, it's a tough road relating to God.
Practice is relatively easy, and it's been made even easier today. Thinking is hard.
That's true, very true, and that's a good way of ending.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank
welcome.
you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes,
Okay.
you're welcome.
Uh,